Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. A few news and notes to break down today, including some stuff going on with Keith's own Boston Celtics. We'll talk a little bit about Rajon Rondo as well, maybe a return to the Lakers in the mix, and Paul Millsap. Where's he going to wind up? But first, let me say thank you to all of you who have subscribed to this channel. We continue to be blown away by all the support that we've received. And right now, we are on the drive to 10,000 subscribers. So if you haven't done so yet, please make sure you subscribe and then turn on notifications as well. Keith, how are you doing, man? A new puppy in the household. Always a tough thing to go through at first, trying to, adjust sleep and all that.
Yeah, we're good, and he is excellent. He's a really good dog. It's just he's up every 2 hours at night, so we're up every 2 hours. We're just trying to get him out so he gets used to and wants to go in his crate, and he's okay. But yeah, but he's cute. He's a cute little guy. I put up a couple pictures on my Twitter feed of him, including one of him napping right on top of me last night, where he just kind of passed out. So he's a good boy.
So see, if there wasn't reason enough to follow Keith on Twitter already, just for all the NBA goodness that he provides, now you also get puppy pictures. So make sure you are following him over there at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, I
Puppies
guess
and hoops. What more can you want?
Puppies and hoops. It doesn't get any better than that, right?
That's it.
Let's kick things off with your guy, the Time Lord, Robert Williams, a new deal. And I'll admit, when this first came out, I went, ooh. That's a lot of money for a guy that struggled to stay healthy, but I know you're going to explain to me why this is a good deal for the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, and you're not wrong in feeling that way. 13.5 million average annual value for Williams with the Celtics in this deal. It's 4 years, 54 million. We don't know if there's any options on there yet. I don't think there's going to be. My guess is it'll just be a straight 4 year deal, and it'll probably be increasing. So it'll start somewhere in the 12 million range and then climb from there. It is a lot of money for a guy who can't stay healthy. That is the single biggest concern. But when he is healthy, his impact is ridiculous. He is one of the best shot blockers in the game. If you go and look at some of his shot blocking metrics, and the fact that he gets them, he doesn't have to chase them. He gets them on anybody. He's one of the few guys in the league who has multiple times switched on to James Harden and blocked his step back three-pointer, which is not an easy thing to do without fouling him. And Williams can do it because he just gets straight up and down so high so quickly. He's an elite lob threat at the rim. He's got actually a pretty nice jump shot, and he's a much better passer than I think the average person realizes. The Celtics started running last year a lot of their old Al Horford sets with Williams as the primary distributor from the top of the key. So all that said, if he stays healthy, 13.5 million for a guy who will probably be Boston's starting five at some point within the next, let's call it, year or two, as Al Horford ages out and probably won't be on the roster. I'm not sold he's going to start. A lot of Celtics fans, even some in Celtics media, think he's going to start over Horford. I'm not fully there yet. I think there's a chance too they play together some, just because Horford can step out and shoot the ball in certain matchups when they go against bigger teams. That like if they were playing the Lakers, that could be a game where the two of them start. But it's all about health for Williams. Right. If he doesn't stay healthy, then this is going to be one of those contracts where it's going to be sitting on the books, and you're like, oh man, 13, 14 million for Williams, and we're going to get 40 games out of him. So that's the struggle here. But if he stays healthy, that's great value for what he can have, because he's still in a lot of ways just kind of scratching the surface of his potential.
Well, and when we're looking at this, you said that the high post passing has started to become a thing, a la Al Horford. Well, now he can learn that skill even more from Al Horford, who is now back on the team. So that certainly helps with his development and everything. Very talented player. The shot blocking is certainly impressive. In order for the Celtics to get solid value on this, in my mind, he essentially has to get not necessarily like the top, not Joel Embiid tier or anything like that, but I'm thinking like a Clint Capella tier big man is about what he needs to get to in order for this to be just a solid value contract.
Yeah, that's spot on. And I think if you're the Celtics, that's what you're hoping for, is a Capella-like ascendancy here. Capella, first couple years was kind of, maybe there's something here, and then eventually he became Clint Capella. That's what you're hoping for with Williams, and a lot of that is going to be health-driven. If he stays healthy, I think he'll get there, and I think he has the potential to even be maybe a little bit better than Capella if he's fully healthy. He's probably not going to be the rebounder Capella is because
Mhm.
he's one of the best rebounders in the league.
Right.
But Williams, I think, is a better shot blocker. He's a better defender because he's so fast. He can switch on to just about anybody and hold his own. As I mentioned, he's switched on to Harden multiple times and held his own. So I think that's what you're hoping for, though, if you're the Celtics. And offensively, he's a better passer already. He's got touch 12, 15 feet
Mhm.
right now. I don't know that he's ever going to stretch that all the way to the arc, but who knows? Sometimes bigs that comes in year 7, 8 versus year 4 or 5. So we'll see if that ultimately comes or not. And I don't know that Boston necessarily wants that to be what he does. I think they more would rather have him inside and around the rim.
Mhm.
But we'll see where this one goes. And now, what I think is really important is with this and the Marcus Smart extension and the creation of a yet another trade exception in the Evan Fournier sign and trade, the Celtics are going to function as an over the cap team next
Yep.
offseason, almost assuredly. There was a path where they could have got to about 30, 35 million in cap space. They basically wiped the deck clean as much as they could. That's highly unlikely to happen. My guess now is they will just keep Al Horford and fully guarantee his contract because if nothing else, that's 26 million or so in tradable salary, which is also an important thing to note here. Also with Williams, that's important to know. You're starting to stack some salaries together if you wanted to go get somebody via sign and trade or just straight trade. So I think the Celtics, as much as I was down on them, as recently as about 2 weeks ago, when they were sending signals of, well, we can't go into the
Right.
tax because we're going to spend money next summer. Those things don't really match up because it's very hard to go from cap space and into the tax in the same summer. You almost have to have a Duncan Robinson like tiny little cap hold
Right.
that explodes into a full blown $20 million a year contract. But now it makes sense what they're doing, and they're about 6 million over the tax right now, which is that's within range. That's a trade or two of getting out of the tax entirely. And the important thing to note is they don't need to be out of the tax until we get to the trade deadline. That's when you got to get out of the tax. So we'll see. And I think the roster is better for this upcoming season than it was a year ago. I think
Mhm.
they have more depth. I think they have more versatility. So I'm a lot higher on the team in both the short and long term than I was a couple of weeks ago.
Well, and now they've been named as a prime landing spot for Bradley Beal if he does decide to leave the Washington Wizards. And a lot of people have been making this comment, going, "Oh, well, clearly the Celtics are now out on that." No, not so, not at
No,
all. They're
yeah,
still in a position now where you can take these guys. Like, let's say Williams hits this year, and he suddenly is that Clint Capella tier big man. Well, don't you think that a team like the Washington Wizards would want something like that in a sign
yeah,
and trade situation? So now you've got contracts you can stack up that you can offer that aren't Jaylen Brown, right? That aren't Jason Tatum that you can now offer up
exactly.
in order to make a deal work. So if Bradley Beal goes to the Wizards and says, "Look," and I know this is like the Celtics' dream scenario, so excuse me, I'm gonna kind of try to push through this here, Keith. But if Beal goes to the Wizards and says, "Hey, look, I'm gonna leave. I really want to go to the Celtics. Would appreciate if you guys help me get there," and then you've got that kind of negotiating leverage there where you're not going to get this huge return for him. It'll still be something significant, but that's where suddenly the Celtics are operating in a world where maybe they can get Bradley Beal without giving up their main pieces.
Yeah, and I want to be clear on this. This is not Trevor said this, not the Celtics guy. Was not the one who brought up Bradley Beal before everybody jumps in the comments and says Homer is living in Beal land. Because I've continued to say, as I do with all of these guys, until Bradley Beal says he wants out,
Yep.
Bradley, I don't think Bradley Beal wants to go anywhere. I
No.
truly believe Bradley Beal wants to stay right in Washington. He screams almost like Damian Lillard
Yep.
to me, where it's I'm going to stick this out until it really goes too far, and then it's not looking very good. So yeah, but whether it's Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine or
Sure.
Damian Lillard or Superstar X that we don't know today that is going to come on the market, the Celtics are now in position to chase those guys. It's not chase them via cap space, but nobody's going to be in that position this offseason. I'm just starting now that the deals are all kind of finalized and in there for the most part. I'm starting to look at next summer. It's going to be somewhere between 3 and 5 teams that have cap space,
Right.
and most of them are pretty bad.
And there's
So
and
it's
there's not
not,
much on
it's,
the market anyway.
and
So
that's it.
yeah.
Exactly. So it's going to be signing trades. The trade market, I think, is going to be extremely robust.
Hmm.
Not to mention too, Horford as a 26 million expiring contract. That's one where you could say, all right, Washington, what's a bad contract you want to get off of
Yeah.
that you don't really like? All right, well, now we've got enough. We can piece it together, also using Al Horford if we need to do that to get there. Boston has all of their own first round picks, so they could put those together. So, and that's the same conversation with Chicago or with Portland or with any team where a superstar becomes available. I think Brad Stevens is going to take the same approach as Danny Ainge as far as that goes, of when the player becomes available, you just want to put yourself in the mix. And that was, Ainge's approach going all the way back to the KG trade,
Hmm.
was when that star is finally on the market, let's just be in the range where
And
we
that
can make
star
that
is
a
being traded by
conversation.
your old buddy.
Well, that certainly did not hurt
That
at
helps
all.
too.
There. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever told you, I was living in Southern California when that trade went down. I was
Oh,
living in Irvine at the time, and I was and that trade actually happened on my birthday. So I had spent it's I don't know how it worked. Well, for you being a teacher, I don't know how this worked on birthdays,
yeah.
but in the office environment world, when it was your birthday, you kind of didn't do a lot of work
Yeah,
where
right.
I was. You went out for a long lunch, and I went to lunch with a lot of Lakers fans who told me, nope, KG's coming to
That's
LA, and
right.
we already, it was the whole, and
Get
this was
Garnett. Yep, I
like,
remember.
there was no Twitter, so the internet was very kind of messy then too, because there was
Yep.
like reports you would see, and you'd be on like websites hitting your refresh
Message boards and all that.
repeatedly,
Yep.
message boards, yeah. And so there was, oh, I already saw him at the airport in LA, and he's coming to the Lakers and all this stuff. And then when it became clear about, it was about midday California time, because it was the afternoon on the East Coast. It was like, wait, this is getting done, and he's going to Boston. Oh boy, did your boy gloat. I gloated up and down. And then of course, right, they went on later that same season. Unfortunately, I was already living back in Florida at that time. The Disney company had moved my wife and I back home as Boston won that championship. But yeah, I was a pretty happy guy that summer, because on my birthday, that can't beat that very
That
much.
would
Getting KG. So
that was a nice
yeah,
birthday
and then
present for you. Thank you, Kevin
that's
McHale,
it.
right?
And now they're going to retire his number
That's right. I
as
saw that.
the schedule came out, March
Hmm.
5th, I think, or something like that. So
Yep.
somewhere in that range, March 19th. I don't know, March something or other. This year they delayed it because they wanted to do it clearly with fans
Yeah.
in the building. And if there's one thing the Celtics need, it's another retired jersey, because pretty soon every guy on the team will be wearing numbers in the 90s, because it'll be all that's left.
Well, certainly much deserved for Kevin Garnett to get that jersey retired
Yeah.
there. And yeah, look, I mean, hey, when you can take your birthday and celebrate something like that, I got to celebrate a Pau Gasol trade, right? I think it was either on my birthday or right around my birthday. So that was always a lot of fun.
Take it,
It's
right?
great when stuff like that happens, and it happens to be your birthday as well. Speaking of former Celtics and former Lakers, I guess as well, Rajon Rondo. This is something
Yeah.
that you and I talked about when that trade first went down, sending Rondo to the Grizzlies as well as Patrick Beverly. And we had some other, Daniel Oturo went as well in exchange for Eric Bledsoe. We said, look, a lot of these guys probably aren't going to stick with the Grizzlies. Patrick Beverly's already gone.
Yep.
And now a recent report coming out of Memphis says that Rondo is not likely to stay either. So that's just confirmation now coming from the Memphis side from what we had been saying going in, was that, look, these guys probably aren't staying, maybe looking at a buyout. Of course, you try to find a trade first, but doesn't sound like Rondo will be actually putting on a Grizzlies jersey.
Yeah, and no surprise there. They don't really have a big need for him.
Or a roster spot.
They are, yeah, exactly. They've got John Morant, they've got Tyus Jones, they've got DeAnthony Melton, who can kind of play a little bit of point
Mhm.
guard too. So they're stocked there. They've got, they can't even make the Beverly trade yet, and that to the second Beverly trade. The first one is done, but the second one to Minnesota, because they have to clear a roster spot to do another 2-for-1 trade in that deal. So right now the Grizzlies are at it. Just as a reminder to everybody, you can carry up to 20 players in the offseason, and Memphis is at 20, so they're at their max. But they also have right now, they have it's I'm doing some math quickly here in my head. I think they've got 16 or 17 fully guaranteed contracts as well. So they've got they've got 17. So that's 2 plus
Yeah.
what you can have in the regular season. So they're gonna have to do another move just to make the Beverly trade. That move may be as simple as waiving Rondo and moving on or working a buyout with him. His number's big enough that it'll probably be some form of buyout.
Yeah.
It was funny. I saw people tweeted at me like, "Hey, Rajon Rondo's at the Dodgers game. What do we think this means?" And I was like, "I think it means he
Nothing.
still lives in
Yeah.
LA."
There's a lot of
That's what
it.
I think it means.
If every
Yeah,
player who lived in LA and went to a game or something meant something, then I don't know.
exactly.
The Lakers would have like
Yeah,
50 players on their roster.
yeah. Well, I mean, don't they? So it feels like it.
Just about.
Even though they're still sitting on
They're
three
sitting
open
at
roster
12.
spots
Yeah,
somehow.
they're at 12. And
Yeah,
and word is they're only going to use 2 of them. They're going to keep one open.
yeah, yeah. And that's interesting too, a little bit. I
Yeah.
think that's the way to go
Yeah.
for them. I mean, they're already at the tipping point of, and we'll go back to Rondo in a second, but just with the Lakers, they're already at the tipping point of maybe having one or two too many
Mhm.
guys that are going to want to play, because clearly there's some of those vets didn't sign on just to be there
Right.
and be the locker room guy. They're guys who can still play. It'll clearly resolve itself because they're not going to push overly hard in the regular season. Is my guess. They'll be a lot of rest nights
Yeah.
for guys and those kind of things, the older guys. So, but yeah, back to the Grizzlies. It's kind of weird because I don't know that any of the 3 guys they got from the Clippers for Bledsoe are ever going to suit up in a Memphis uniform.
No.
Beverly clearly isn't. It doesn't sound like Rondo's gonna. Let's see what happens with Daniel Oturu. He could be gone as well. And that would beg some people to be like, why did they even do it? Well, they did it because then they were able to flip Beverly
Right.
to go get Hernan Gomez and Jarrett Culver. And then we'll see what happens with those 2 guys. I think Hernan Gomez can clearly help them, but we'll see. And then let's just assume Rondo shakes free.
Yeah.
Despite kind of poking fun at he's at a Dodgers game comment there. I do think that there's a good chance he can't go back to the Clippers, right? We know that because the whole 1-year restriction. But I do think there's a chance he could return to the Lakers. They as I look at it, they could still use one more kind of pure point guard on the roster. Because Kendrick Nunn is not, he plays point guard, but he's kind of a good point guard to be with LeBron, who's going to handle the ball a lot to play off him, because that's what he did in Miami with Jimmy Butler. But one more pure point guard on those nights when Westbrook sits, I think, it wouldn't shock me at all if that's where Rondo landed. He'll certainly have, 7-8 teams that'll reach out to him and say, hey, what's your interest? Do you want to, do you want to play? Do you want to come in here? But he's going to pick somewhere where it's going to be, am I going to have a role? And are they a title contender? Because that's what he's going to want.
Yeah, exactly. And all the word coming out of, out around the Lakers has been they're looking for a guard. One of those 2 spots is going to go to a guard. The other one, they might be looking for a wing. I still think, a lot of people in Lakerland have been saying, why have they not done anything yet? Why do they still have open roster spots? Use these spots, sign somebody. I think they're waiting. They're waiting to see if somebody shakes loose on the buyout market. And I think it very well could be Rondo. So we'll see what.
Yeah, there's no reason to rush. Yeah, they don't need. I mean, especially it's the end of August. They don't even open training camp for a month. Yeah. So there's no reason to rush into this right now. And clearly, the guys that are still left they're left for reasons, whether they're being picky or the teams are just not that high on them. I know we want to switch to one right now. Yeah. Paul Millsap, still out there, probably best big, second best big, still left on the market, depending on how you feel about Lauri Markkanen. But Millsap's cleaner because he's an unrestricted free agent, where Markkanen's restricted, so that makes it a little bit more difficult to get anything done. But yeah, Millsap, we're hearing Warriors or maybe Nets are interested. We've heard a bunch of different teams. Celtics fans all got in a tizzy because he posted it was either a video or a picture of himself working out and said, I'm lucky to still be doing this or something. And he had a shamrock in there. Okay. So Celtics fans are like, he's coming to Boston. And I was like, I think that's just the universal sign for luck. But, so it's just, it goes back to like eye emoji, right? The players post the eye emojis and everybody goes bananas. So yeah, we'll see. I think, Millsap's a guy can still help. Yeah. Teams. He's not going to play 30 minutes a night for you, but you plug him in for 20, 24 minutes a night off your bench, you're doing pretty good, I think, if he's your 3rd or 4th pick.
And what we're seeing right now is he's been connected to the Nets and Warriors, but he's another guy where he could talk to 10 different teams, and there are a number of different teams
Yep.
that could say, oh, we could really use that skill set. It's not like he's a tough fit anywhere. He's a guy that you can slot in,
No.
can step in, can shoot the three a little bit, play a little bit of backup big. You want to play a little five, small ball five, he could probably do that for you. Again, he's not the guy that he used to be. Obviously, he's getting up there in years, but he's still somebody that a lot of teams would be happy to bring into their roster. And so it's not a surprise that the Nets and Warriors are some of the teams that we're hearing, but I think there's going to be some other ones too that are going to be lining up if and when he says, okay, guys, it's time for me to make a decision. I think he's going to have plenty of options out there.
Yeah, and I think at this point in his career too, Millsap's a guy I don't know that he would mind signing maybe a week into camp
Yep.
preseason because
Skip
why
camp.
why go through that if he doesn't need to? Yeah, Mike Scott's another guy,
Mm-hmm.
Avery Bradley. I think those guys are all probably somewhat in those
Mm-hmm.
positions. And then also too, unfortunately, it's not quite at the level of the NFL where there's preseason injuries that then open up full on jobs and roles and
Right.
things, but it does happen on occasion in the NBA. So those guys may be waiting it out. And then I talked about Markkanen briefly, just to kind of close the loop on that one. As a restricted free agent, he's just kind of stuck
Yeah.
right now. There's not anything the Bulls need to do. They can go all the way to March 1st. I've had that question a lot.
Wow.
What's the latest he can sign that restricted free agent qualifying offer? So it's clearly not going to get there. He'll sign that before training camp if that's what it comes down to. And then what the process would be is he would sign that. He's essentially on a 1-year contract. He would have a full no trade clause because he would lose his bird rights if he's traded because it's a 1-year deal. But then he'd be an unrestricted free agent in the summer of 2022. And if you're Lauri Markkanen, that if you can't find the contract you really want, that's maybe not the worst thing, because if he can have a good year, the 2022 free agent class is pretty
It
bad.
is.
So being an unrestricted free agent that year could actually be a benefit where you could say, hey, I'm a big who can score 15 to 20 points per game, stretch the floor some. Defensively, I can score 20 points per game and stretch the floor some. So that's take it or leave it there. But yeah, it's going to be one to keep an eye on here. The longer it goes, the more likely I think it is that he just signs that qualifying offer and returns to Chicago for the year. But somebody is still going to float around out there, and there are a handful of teams that have been mentioned as still potential destinations for him, and looking at what would it take to bring him in. But then the problem is it's got to be a sign and trade this late in the offseason. You're starting to run up against hard cap issues and roster spot issues and all those kind of things, and that just gets a little messy.
It's my suspicion, based on what's going on now with Markkanen and what we've seen in the past with restricted free agency, is that next time there is a CBA negotiation, I don't recall off the top of my head when the current one is going to expire, but I think this is something the players are going to bring up. CJ McCollum, who's going to become the Players Association president, I had some choice words on the Woj pod the other day about restricted free agency in relation to Kendrick Nunn and what happened there with the Miami Heat pulling his qualifying offer. But by that point, a lot of the money had dried up, and CJ McCollum was clearly
Yep.
irked by that. He was not pleased by the way that played out. I still say, look, in the Miami Heat's defense, this year's free agency went light speed. I mean, it was so fast.
Yeah.
There's just, I think Miami may have had the best intentions of cutting him loose in time for him to go find something else, but the money dried up so quickly. But still, it's situations like this with Markkanen where you can see from the player's perspective, restricted free agency is brutal because so many teams are just, they're not even willing to touch it. They're not willing to issue a contract. They're not willing to risk it because nobody wants to have their cap space tied up. So I would expect that from the
Yep.
player side, this is something they're going to try to address during the next negotiation.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, let's continue to use Markkanen
Yeah.
here as our example. This late in the game, the best anybody can do for him is the non-taxpayer mid-level, or you could be OKC and get into cap space and other things that they're the only ones that can still do that. That's non-taxpayer mid-level. If you're going to sign him to an offer sheet, it needs to be at least 3 years in length. At most, it could be 4 years. The first, it's just it becomes, if I'm the Bulls, you just match that and you don't even think
Right.
about it. Because even if you don't like Lauri Markkanen,
He's worth
$9.5 million first year salary, up to, let's call it 10 million, 10 and a half, and then 11 roughly is what that would work out to. That That's done. That's easy. I'm going to match that all day long. That's not even a question mark for me. I'm going to move on that one and keep him moving along in the process here with us. But yeah, so that gets really tough this late in the game. Now, on the flip side, did they play themselves a little? What were they looking at? He wasn't a restricted free agent, but clearly that happened with Dennis Schroeder. His market never
Right.
developed the way he hoped for, and he had to ultimately take the taxpayer MLE from the Celtics for a year. So that's why if I'm marketing and I was his agent, I'd be saying, hey, let's just do the qualifying offer, hang out, play great. Really, you gotta then you put it on yourself. You've got to have a great year here in Chicago. If the Bulls are, we're not going to play you, we're going to play you 5 minutes a night, those kind of things. Then you start agitating for a trade and
Absolutely.
other things where you've got that opportunity and you punt on the bird rights because the reality is I don't know how much your bird rights are going to matter anyway,
Right.
because the only team that they can matter to if you sign the qualifying offer is Chicago. And I know there's still, they keep throwing out all these weird sign and trade scenarios and those kind of things. I mean, maybe that is the way it goes down, but that's where I think this one is headed is just sign the qualifying offer and move on. And I do wonder if a little bit is his market maybe is tied to Millsap and what he ultimately does.
Could be.
Clearly wouldn't be the case with the Warriors or Nets because they're just going to bring him in on a minimum deal. Well, the Warriors still do have their taxpayer mid level because they their three offseason signings, Porter, Bielitsa, and Iguodala, were all for the minimum. So they're kind of holding that out there. But the Nets also have their taxpayer mid level left too. So right, no, I'm sorry, they used that on Patty
Yeah,
Mills,
they did.
so they don't
They
have
did.
that
But
left.
if
So yeah, so
like if they
yeah,
were to offer that, then the Bulls are just matching because that's a value
yeah, just gonna
contract. So
match it.
there's
Oh,
no
100%.
he's going to be with the
Yeah,
Bulls unless somebody offers something
yep,
up big up in a sign and trade, which that
yep.
would have happened by now if that was going to happen.
You would
Yeah.
think. Yeah, and Chicago, you would think too, would be looking at it and saying, hey, yeah, we need, because they clearly still need some depth. So yeah, they'd love to get a couple
Yeah.
players, for marketing and the matching and then just move on. But yeah, I don't think that's going to be the way it plays out. And then beyond those two guys, I mean, it's not Avery Bradley, James Ennis, Boogie Cousins.
Yep.
It's starting to get pretty bare here free agent wise. Because what we're going to see now over the next 3 to 4 weeks as teams get ready to open their training camps on, I believe it's the 28th, is when camp officially opens. So it looks like media day will be around the 27th of September. Uh, Teams are going to be filling out. You're going to see here a whole bunch of signings, but they're all going to be signings to fill out camp
Yep.
rosters, and then targeted at getting guys to their G League teams. And we'll talk about that process in a future show a little bit there because that's it. I think it's of interest to some people how that kind of works, but we won't get into that here today.
So don't the big takeaway there is don't panic when you hear, oh, the Brooklyn Nets sign player X, who's probably a guy that you haven't heard of. There's
Yeah,
camp deals that are going to start coming out. Don't freak out when all that stuff starts coming down
and don't
in a
get
few
overly
weeks.
excited because
Yeah.
yeah, because he played on your favorite college
Right.
team or where you went to school or something like that. Because there is a chance that guy's probably not going to end up on the NBA roster. Like I
Yeah.
was looking at it the other day, and there's some guys out there like that popped a little bit in summer league. There's a couple like John
Yeah.
Petty was at Alabama. I know he's somebody that a couple different teams like Marcus Garrett's another guy played at Kansas. So those guys will probably pop up on somebody's team. And it's funny because that tends to be sometimes the world I can live in a little bit because those are smaller signings. So I'll get maybe a little heads up on those.
Hmm.
And it's funny whenever I do have one of those as my piece of news to share, I'll get a bunch of fans from that team being like, "Yeah, my boy made it to the NBA," and it's like, your
Eh,
boy made it to the NBA for a month,
yeah.
and then he's gonna get cut.
Don't hold your breath.
But hey, it's further than I ever made it to the
That's
NBA.
right.
So and getting to the G League is no joke because then you're a step away.
Very
So
true.
it is still good. So yeah, and now exciting too. It's not anything we're gonna spend a lot of time breaking down, but the schedule's out. And
Hmm.
that's pretty great too because it allows me to start mapping out. All right, this is maybe where I want to go for a trip this year, and
Hmm.
I'm going to try to do one this year. Now that we're back to knocking on wood here, uh, semi-normal, hopefully,
Hopefully, we'll see.
in the world. But it, especially here in Orlando, I can start seeing, one or certain teams coming in,
Mhm.
especially the Western Conference teams who we only get to see once here. I like to see when they're coming in town. Maybe the Lakers. Might have taken a peek at that one the other day to see. I want to say that's semi early in the season they come in.
Yeah, I think it is.
Here. So yeah, and Boston makes 2 trips to Orlando, which I'm forever thankful for when that happens, and a preseason trip this year to Orlando. So I'll get to see them 3 times, 30 minutes from my house versus hours away. So I'll take it. But yeah, schedule's out there. We can start mapping that stuff out. We know what all the big days look like and all that stuff. My one request on the schedule is stop putting so many afternoon games early in the season when the NFL is still playing and
Yes.
college football is still
Yep.
playing. It's so dumb. I love afternoon games. Don't get me wrong, but put them later in the year when there's nothing else on those afternoons. That gets me out of a whole weekend of doing stuff because I'm like I gotta work.
Sorry.
So that's my one request to the NBA is please stop putting them on in the afternoon in the fall when there's football games on because even I'm an NBA guy, but I still am gonna watch a good amount of football.
Absolutely. I am as well, and I agree 100%. I hate it when that happens. But that's when I just have to tell my wife, sorry, got to bring in a second TV. It's just there's no getting around it. It's what we got to do.
Yep.
And so far it's worked.
Same thing here in this house.
All right. Well, the NBA season not too far away. We're getting there. We're getting there. We got about another month or so, and then everything's going to start really ramping up. Still got into some interesting stuff today, particularly with Robert Williams. Then everything going on with Rajon Rondo, Millsap, Markkinen, all kinds of stuff still taking place around the world of the NBA. So make sure you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications as well, and don't forget to like this video.
Team reviews and previews coming
That's right.
soon. We're probably going to do 2 teams a day, one East, one West team a day. Probably hit those every other day ish, in that range. We'll get all 30 in probably right around when training camp is starting. So continue to come back to the channel and the podcast version because we'll be here. And then, of course, if there's major news, Ben Simmons trade, let's just say, we'll probably do a one-off show around that. Yeah, fingers crossed. Absolutely.
All right, guys. So that is coming. Again, great reason to subscribe. Till next time, everybody. Stay safe and see ya.